announcing the passing of my Aunt Dolly Rebecca Parton Dean, sister, sis, Aunt Granny to one generation and Gigi to the next.
What if the most disturbing thing discovered after Dolly Parton's death wasn't a hidden room, a mysterious document, or some shocking secret, but the realization that the private world she protected for decades was suddenly left behind? On August 25, 2026, Dolly Parton died at the age of 80 after a brief battle with cancer, and almost immediately attention turned toward the enormous legacy she left behind. But there is an important distinction between what is actually known and what the internet is claiming. There is currently no credible evidence that the FBI raided Dolly Parton's estate or discovered criminal or horrifying material inside her home. Those claims appear to be sensationalized. What we can examine, however, is the real story of Dolly's private properties, her marriage to Carl Dean, the preparations surrounding her estate, and the deeply personal things that may now become part of her legacy. And once you understand how carefully Dolly separated her public life from her private one, the story becomes surprisingly emotional. Dolly Parton was not simply a country singer. She was a songwriter, actress, entrepreneur, philanthropist, author, and cultural icon whose career lasted more than 6 decades. She came from extraordinary poverty in Tennessee and eventually built an entertainment empire that reached millions of people around the world. Her death was announced by her nephew Brian Seaver in a pre-recorded message. According to reports, Dolly had asked him years earlier to make the announcement when the time came. Her family later confirmed that she died at Vanderbilt Ingram Cancer Center in Nashville after a brief battle with cancer. The timing made her passing even more heartbreaking. Dolly had already experienced the loss of her husband, Carl Dean, in March 2025. Their marriage had lasted almost 6 decades. Carl was famously private, rarely appearing beside Dolly at public events and choosing a life far removed from the attention that followed his wife everywhere. That privacy became one of the defining features of their relationship. Dolly was one of the most recognizable women on earth, while Carl was almost the complete opposite. He did not want the cameras. He did not seek interviews. He did not attempt to become famous simply because he had married someone famous. And Dolly respected that. Their relationship began in 1964, shortly after Dolly arrived in Nashville as an ambitious young woman trying to establish herself in country music. 2 years later they were married. Their relationship survived fame, touring, rumors, business pressures, and decades of public attention. When Carl died, Dolly suddenly lost the person who had known her before the world knew her. That detail changes the way we should look at everything left behind. Because when people talk about a celebrity estate, they often imagine money first. Millions of dollars. Luxury homes. Cars. Jewelry. Music rights. Business interests. But an estate is also a collection of memories. And Dolly's private world was filled with memories. Her career began in the mountains of East Tennessee, where she was born in 1946. She grew up as one of 12 children in a family that had very little money. Her childhood home was a small one-room cabin, and her family struggled financially. Yet those difficult beginnings became one of the greatest sources of Dolly's creativity. She transformed poverty into stories. She transformed family memories into songs. She transformed hardship into ambition. And she never seemed embarrassed by where she came from. That is one reason the objects left behind by Dolly may be more meaningful than any alleged secret. A photograph from her childhood could tell more about her than an expensive piece of jewelry. A handwritten lyric could reveal more about her creative process than a luxury car. A family letter could carry more emotional weight than a room filled with awards. And somewhere among the possessions connected to Dolly's life are almost certainly reminders of the people who shaped her. Her parents. Her brothers and sisters, her husband, her friends, her collaborators, and the millions of fans who became part of her story. Dolly once said that her father's inability to read and write affected her deeply. That experience eventually helped inspire one of her most important philanthropic projects, the Imagination Library. The program began in Dolly's home region and eventually expanded internationally, sending free books to children. According to The Guardian, the program now distributes nearly 25 million books each year across multiple countries. That is an extraordinary legacy. And it tells us something about Dolly that a sensational estate rumor never could. She remembered what it felt like to grow up without much. Instead of forgetting those experiences after becoming wealthy, she used them to help others. The same pattern appeared throughout her career. Dolly did not simply become rich and famous. She built things. She invested. She created entertainment. She developed Dollywood. She supported literacy. She contributed to medical research. She helped communities affected by disasters. And she continued writing and performing long after many entertainers would have retired. That work ethic became one of her most recognizable characteristics. So when people ask what was found after her death, the honest answer is that we should be cautious about pretending to know details that have not been publicly verified. The internet loves the idea of a secret room. It loves mysterious boxes. It loves hidden documents. It loves stories suggesting that a beloved celebrity had a dark side nobody knew about. But those stories can easily cross the line from entertainment into misinformation. There is currently no credible reporting establishing that authorities found something disturbing inside Dolly's estate. What has been reported is something much more interesting. Dolly had already been organizing parts of her financial and property affairs before her death. One recent report claimed that her Tennessee plantation, known as Willow Lake Plantation, was transferred to the D.P. Dean Trust in April 2026. The report described the property as a large private estate associated with Dolly and Carl. Because that specific ownership detail comes from a tabloid report rather than an official estate filing publicly verified in the sources available here, it should be treated as a report, not established fact. And that distinction matters. Because estate planning is not evidence of wrongdoing. It is preparation. People with significant assets often create trusts, establish beneficiaries, transfer property, organize businesses, and make plans for what happens after their death. Dolly had every reason to do that. Her financial world was enormous. She had music rights, business interests, real estate, charitable organizations, entertainment properties, and a vast catalog of songs. The challenge after her death is therefore not simply figuring out who gets a house. It is figuring out how an entire legacy continues. Her music catalog alone represents decades of creative work. Songs such as Jolene, 9 to 5, Coat of Many Colors, and I Will Always Love You became cultural landmarks. I Will Always Love You is particularly significant because Dolly wrote it herself. The song later became a global phenomenon when Whitney Houston recorded it for the movie, The Bodyguard. That means Dolly's estate is not merely inheriting physical objects. It is inheriting intellectual property that will continue producing income and influencing musicians long after her death. The same applies to her businesses. Dollywood was not simply a theme park with Dolly's name attached to it. It became one of the most important parts of her public legacy. Following her death, Dollywood released a statement saying that Dolly wanted the park to remain a place of joy, hope, togetherness, music, and shared dreams. The park also confirmed that it would continue operating. That statement may be one of the clearest clues about what Dolly wanted her legacy to look like. Not darkness. Not controversy. Not secrecy. Joy. Her estate therefore represents a complicated balance. There is the public Dolly. The woman who wore rhinestones, enormous hairstyles, and unforgettable costumes. The performer who could walk onto a stage and instantly control the room. Then there was the private Dolly. The woman who valued family. The woman who protected her marriage. The woman who understood that not every part of life needed to be shared with the public. That private side is probably what makes people so curious about her home. A celebrity's house can become a kind of time capsule. Rooms remain filled with objects that were once part of ordinary life. A favorite chair can remain exactly where it was. Photographs can stay on shelves. Clothing can remain in closets. Books can remain unopened. Music can remain stored in rooms. And personal notes can sit quietly in drawers. None of those things are disturbing. But they can be devastating after someone dies. Because suddenly every ordinary object becomes evidence of absence. A kitchen can feel empty. A bedroom can feel silent. A guitar can sit untouched. A photograph can become a reminder that the person in it will never take another photograph. That may be the most haunting part of any celebrity estate. Not what was discovered. What was missing. The person. For Dolly, that absence was already beginning before her own death. Carl Dean died in March 2025, leaving Dolly to face a world without the man who had been beside her since before her fame exploded. After his death, Dolly spoke about the difficulty of adjusting to life without him. She continued working, however, and remained determined to keep moving forward. That was Dolly's pattern throughout her life. Keep going. She kept going after poverty. She kept going after professional setbacks. She kept going when people doubted her. She kept going when the music industry changed. She kept going when she entered Hollywood. She kept going when she built businesses. And she kept going after losing Carl. Until eventually her own journey came to an end. The reaction to Dolly's death demonstrated how many lives she had touched. Tributes came from musicians, actors, politicians, fans, and organizations around the world. Reuters reported that international landmarks and performers paid tribute to her music and influence. But perhaps the most fitting tribute came from Dollywood itself. The park did not describe Dolly's legacy as something that should be frozen. It emphasized continuing her values. That is important because Dolly herself was always about movement. She moved from the mountains to Nashville. From songwriter to performer. From country star to crossover celebrity. From entertainer to entrepreneur. From celebrity to philanthropist. And from a private dreamer to someone whose influence reached millions of children. The objects in her estate can therefore only tell a fraction of the story. A trophy can tell us she won. A photograph can tell us where she was. A contract can tell us what she built. A handwritten lyric can tell us what she created. But none of those objects can completely explain why people loved her. That came from something harder to preserve. Her personality. Her humor. Her ability to make people feel included. Her willingness to laugh at herself. Her determination to stay connected to her roots. And her ability to tell stories that made people feel understood. That is why the title of this story can be misleading if we allow it to become a claim that has not been proven. There is no verified evidence that Dolly's estate contained some horrifying secret discovered by investigators. There is, however, something deeply unsettling about what happens when a person who seemed larger than life suddenly becomes part of history. The world continues. The music continues. The businesses continue. The theme park continues. The books continue arriving in children's homes. The songs continue playing. But Dolly is no longer here to create the next one. That is the real shock. For decades, Dolly made the future feel endless. She always had another project. Another song. Another appearance. Another idea. Another dream. Even shortly before her death, she was still associated with plans for future work, including the musical based on her life. That makes her passing especially difficult to process. She was not remembered as someone who had simply stopped. She was remembered as someone who was still dreaming. And perhaps that is why the estate matters. It is the place where the dreams eventually stop becoming new dreams and start becoming history. Imagine opening a drawer and finding a handwritten idea from Dolly. Imagine discovering an old photograph from the early Nashville years. Imagine seeing a costume that once appeared in front of thousands of people. Imagine finding an object Carl had given her decades earlier. To a stranger, those things might be ordinary. To her family, they could be priceless. And that is why some things may never be made public. Not every memory belongs to the audience. Some belong to the family. Some belong to friends. Some belong to the person who lived the life. Dolly spent decades giving the public her creativity. She does not owe the world every private detail she left behind. That is a boundary worth respecting. At the same time, her public legacy will continue to be studied. Researchers will examine her songwriting. Historians will examine her business career. Musicians will analyze her influence. Biographers will revisit her childhood. Fans will continue discovering her music. And future generations will probably find Dolly through songs before they understand the enormous story behind them. A child may hear 9 to 5 without knowing the circumstances that inspired it. Someone may discover Jolene decades after its release and wonder why it still sounds so immediate. Another listener may hear, "I Will Always Love You," and not realize that the song began as Dolly's farewell to Porter Wagoner. That is the strange power of a legacy. The person disappears. The work remains. And the work can continue creating new connections long after the creator is gone. Dolly Parton's story is therefore not really about a mysterious estate. It is about what happens when a private life becomes public history. It is about a woman who spent decades controlling her own story. It is about a husband who remained outside the spotlight. It is about a family that began with very little and produced one of the most successful entertainers in American history. It is about a business empire built from music and imagination. It is about books sent to children. It is about songs that became timeless. And it is about the enormous number of people who now have to learn how to remember Dolly without being able to hear her create something new. So if you came here expecting a shocking FBI discovery, there is an important correction. That story has not been established by credible evidence. We should not turn an unverified rumor into a fact simply because it makes a better headline. The real story is already powerful enough. Dolly Parton died at 80 after a brief battle with cancer. She left behind an extraordinary career. She left behind a vast collection of music. She left behind businesses that will continue. She left behind philanthropic programs that are still helping people. She left behind family memories that may never become public. And she left behind a private world that the public may never completely understand. Perhaps the most disturbing thing about her estate is not something hidden inside. It is the silence. The silence that follows when someone who spent more than 60 years filling the world with music is suddenly gone. The silence inside rooms that once belonged to her. The silence after the final song. The silence experienced by the people who knew her personally. And then, beyond that silence, something else begins. The music starts again. A Dolly Parton song plays on a radio. Someone discovers her for the first time. A child receives a book through the program she created. A family visits Dollywood. A singer performs one of her songs. A writer tells her story. And another generation learns who Dolly Parton was. That is the part of her legacy that no estate can contain. Dolly Parton may have left behind houses, property, music rights, business interests, personal belongings, photographs, and countless memories. But her greatest inheritance belongs to the public. It is the music, the stories, the laughter, the dreams. The reminder that a person can begin with almost nothing and still build something enormous. And maybe that is the final discovery. Not a disturbing secret. Not a hidden crime. Not a mysterious room. But proof that Dolly Parton's life was far more valuable than anything that could ever be found inside a house. Her estate can preserve objects. Her family can preserve memories. Her businesses can preserve her name. But the songs will preserve her voice. And as long as those songs continue to play, Dolly Parton's story will never truly be over. Do you have a favorite Dolly Parton song? Tell us in the comments. Was it Jolene, 9 to 5, Coat of Many Colors, I Will Always Love You, or something less well known? And if you want more carefully researched stories about the final chapters, hidden histories, and legacies of the people who shaped entertainment history, subscribe and stay with us for the next story.